This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody, excited to bring you a special interview with On3 National Scout Cody Bellaire in just a moment. But first, want to remind you guys to subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first 2 months using code SMU1. That's SMU, the number 1. You can enter that promo code and get 2 months for just $1. Gets you into fall camp ahead of the first season of ACC play for the Mustangs. And we are presented by our friends at StatusJet. StatusJet.com. Reach out to David Henry and his team today to get all the information you need on how to book with them the vacation and trip of a lifetime. If you're looking to get something on the books for the 4th of July still, they are an option for you to take you somewhere exotic, somewhere tropical, somewhere fun for your family or your friends or both. And that's the great thing about StatusJet. They can coordinate landing at some of the most exotic locations, some of the most high-profile destinations, or they can just take you from point A to point B, wherever you want to go. Their team can plan it for you with that level of expertise and overall care that you would expect from a company that books private jet charters. So use the code PonyUpACC to get a discount on a round-trip flight with our friends at StatusJet. So without further ado, please enjoy our interview with On3 National Scout, Cody Bellaire. Happy to be joined now on the Pony Express podcast with On3 National Scout, Cody Bellaire. Cody, welcome back. Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, Billy, anytime I check my phone, right, and I see the calls coming and it's Billy Embody, I panic because I have to answer. That's when the GOAT's calling, you answer. So anytime I get a call from Billy Embody, I'm here, man. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, well, appreciate that. Wish more people felt like that. But hey, all right. We love bringing you on every now and again because we got to dive into some of these prospects that SMU's after and or has committed. And it is a perfect time to have you on because the Mustangs are kind of teed up right now for a make or break kind of time in this 2025 class with who they're after, commitment dates approaching, all of that. And I wanted to get your take right off the bat on the biggest name that SMU is after. After Keelan Russell flipped from SMU to Alabama, SMU has turned up the heat on TCU quarterback commit Ty Hawkins. He was at the Elite 11 this week. Wasn't somebody that finished among the top guys, and the offseason isn't necessarily his scene with his ability to run around out there. But what's your evaluation of Ty, SMU's pursuit of him, and all of that, and how he might fit?
Yeah, there's a lot to like about Ty Hawkins, right? We love the tight and compact release. He gets the ball up and out so quickly. He's a great overall athlete. And you touched on that, right? He maneuvers the pocket efficiently. He has the ability to create yards with his legs. He throws a really good looking ball with great zip and velocity. Right now, we have him as like a top 100 prospect, top 10 overall quarterback. Do I think he stays there? I'm not 100% sure. After his junior season, we felt really good about him and the player he was. You go into the spring and watch him work out at the Elite 11 Regional. He looks great, earns his invite to the Elite 11 Finals. Watch him work out at the OT7 Regional, which is the overtime championship 7-on-7 series. He looks pretty good. Then you see him at the OT7 Finals. Thought he looked solid, but he had some decision-making issues, some slight accuracy issues. And then we noticed something in his lower half that we haven't really noticed before. And I'll give a big hat tip to Charles Power, our director of scouting and rankings, on this, because Charles noticed this front leg stiffness that Ty has it greatly affects his accuracy. When he locks that thing out, he really tends to struggle with keeping the ball down. And the accuracy has to do with the lower half mechanical issue, in our opinion. And as we record this, just like you mentioned, he's just wrapped up at the Elite 11 finals. And he had a decent showing, nothing crazy. But really, you see the direction he's been trending this spring, and it's not exactly going in his favor. However, is this a fixable issue? Yes, we believe it is. Plus, he has an entire senior season to iron these things out and perform. Obviously, that's a big piece of the puzzle. So we're excited to see how he plays his senior year and how he continues to play on Friday nights. But this mechanical issue is something worth noting as he heads into his senior season. And we're curious to see if that's addressed or if it's something that lingers throughout his season. I really do think it's a complacency issue. I think it's one of those deals where you have such natural arm talent that you almost seem to tend to like forget about your lower half, right? You kind of gets a little wonky. You start getting off platform. You start to forget using your legs. It's kind of like in baseball when you start seeing slap hitters, they just essentially just lose their entire lower half, which generates so much of your power and so much of your ability to stay consistent. And I really think that's all the issue is for Ty. As long as he can clean that up his senior season and get back to the fundamentals of a passing operation, he'll have a chance to secure that spot as a top 10 player.
Yeah, because he started out as the number one quarterback in Texas, I think. You know, and there is kind of a battle. And I know Keelan's been, on such a big rise with the Elite 11 MVP and everything. And we've watched that up close. And there's some other talented quarterbacks in that class of 2025 in Texas too. But I think Ty fits pretty well in this SMU offense if he does end up flipping there. He's got a guy in Derek King that is kind of similar, but a little shorter, just kind of how they play. I'm intrigued. If he gets that front leg figured out and kind of some mechanics cleaned up. Sometimes I feel like in the offseason, these quarterbacks that are highly touted, too many people get involved and just start telling them things, or they go see one trainer and then see another. So something's got to get cleaned up there for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And when you compare Ty and Keelan is someone that was essentially a raw passer. I think a year ago, I don't know if I've seen a player jump from a mechanical, technical side of things quite like Keelan has this offseason. And, I will say, yes, he flips to Alabama and, it sort of leaves a hole in this SMU class, but it's a testament to that staff. And you identified the right guy. I think that's someone that's continuing to do a stock up, arrow up. And I think Ty is also in that top tier. He's in that group of players that can come in and make an impact immediately, right, for this SMU team. And I think as long as he's able to correct, again, a very fixable part of his game, he's still a top 10 quarterback in the country, and he's somebody that everyone wants. So if you're SMU and you're able to pull off that flip from TCU to SMU, kudos to you, because you hit two quarterbacks in the same cycle, essentially, that are very high caliber players.
Yeah, we talked about some of SMU's evaluations. Cam Collins, who just flipped to Georgia Tech, gets the local school, taking a close eye at him. So SMU is doing something right in the scouting department for sure.
Exactly.
Speaking of some good evals, Dramekco Green is one that had a little bit more of like Power 5 interest and things like that before SMU offered. They offered, I think, in April. But once SMU saw him in person, they went all in and they were able to pull off that commitment this week. So talk a little bit about him. He's from the Houston area. SMU's had some success with guys like Braden West and Xavier Jones from Houston, and of course, dating back to the Pony Express as well. But Dramekco Green is a very guy on the rise type of prospect, I think.
Yeah, Billy. I mean, I got to see Dramekco Green at ESPN's Houston camp. So he showed up this spring, and that was huge for us. And hand up, I will admit, Green was somebody going into that camp that I was relatively unfamiliar with. And big hat tip to you, Billy Embody. You messaged me after he got that SMU offer and were like, hey, now, you need to dive into this cat. And it was maybe a couple days before the numbers and the film from that camp was released. So I just watched him live, and then I just got the tape to go off of, and my eyes perked up after like 2 clips. He has that twitch and the foot speed that everyone in the country is looking for at that position. The body type checks out. He's extremely well put together, a good looking 190 pounds, 195 pounds. He catches the ball out of the backfield comfortably, which is something that's extremely important now out of that position, especially projecting to the next level. And then the numbers came out for the camp, and I was like, oh, okay, this kid's like real. You know what I mean? Like the 40 time was solid, but the shuttle and the broad jump and the vertical numbers were like, wow, good. I mean, he had the second highest vertical at the entire event. So I think it was like 35 inches. So to say that Dramekco's explosive would be an understatement. He's definitely someone that we have extra ultra highlighted going into his senior tape, because if he can bring that type of workout to the field as a senior, this is somebody that could definitely be vying for a 4-star spot, top 300 spot at the end of this whole thing.
And SMU's running back pursuit in the class of 2025 is interesting. They had Ricky Stewart committed at one point.
Right.
They were hot on Tiger Ryden. They were, and still are, at least as of the recording, still very much in the picture for Michael Turner, number 3 running back in the country, who's very good. And out of those 4 with Dramekco, I have him kind of like right there with Michael Turner. Like I saw Ricky Stewart in person. He's a one-cut guy. We've seen that, he kind of trimmed back a little bit from his initial ranking. Tiger Ryden, kind of same thing. I mean, it wouldn't be crazy if Dramekco Green ended up being the most productive out of that 4.
It's really not. And I think it's a matter of he's saving his best for last, right? Like a lot of those guys you mentioned, extremely productive very early on in their careers. And I think with Dramekco, we still needed to see a little more tape on him. And after the in-person viewing, you just have all these questions when you're introduced with some of these players. And for instance, like when you messaged me, that was really sort of the first time I had really taken a dive into Dramekco Green and what he could be. And when you're given that blank slate, or I always call it the puzzle pieces, right? I'm trying to create a puzzle when I take every single prospect. And so with Dramekco, it was like, okay, I got a clean puzzle here. Let's find the corner pieces, and then we'll put the rest of it together. And then with Dramekco, you look at it from the outside going in, and you're like, man, he's got the physical tools. He has the explosiveness. The tape looks good. The in-person workout looks good. I just want to fill more puzzle pieces together and see what this picture really looks like. And I think that's what the senior tape's going to do. It's going to provide much more puzzle pieces that we can hopefully put together a nice, clean puzzle at the end of his senior season. And to use your analogy, Billy, I mean, it really could end up being the prettiest puzzle of the bunch.
I don't know about puzzle pieces and me and analogies.
I love it, dude. I'm an analogy guy. I whip them out, dude. I'm all over the place. That was always the thing that, like, especially when I was like teaching students, like as a personnel guy working for teams and stuff, they're like, Cody, can you just use like the normal terms? Like just use normal things and talk about normal things. But I think if you're able to paint pictures different ways, it clicks for different people. So for me, I like to use the puzzle piece analogy.
Not everyone could be an artist, Cody. So speaking of artistry, there's not many guys at SMU's recruiting, at least, that look like Tyrone Winslow on the defensive line. We've seen Cam Cullins, who decommitted, flipped. Jalen Shivers is a really nice, intriguing prospect that they have committed. Then they have some like very normal looking defensive tackles that they've been after and been associated with. Chase Sims, Dylan Battle officially visited, guys like that.
Yeah.
But Tyrone Winslow checked in, from what I've been told, at a legit 6'5". We know his trainer, Edge Assassins, down there in the boot. He's from South Louisiana, which I think has kind of impacted his recruitment. Kind of an interesting bunch of schools.
For sure.
He's a plug, and SMU sitting in a good spot for him after an official visit, and UL is after him, which is usually a good sign. What's your take after being able to dive into somebody like this who can kind of be a little bit hard to get info on in a way?
Yeah, and it's funny. This is another guy I was able to see at the ESPN Houston camp, and like you said, he walks out there, and you're like, who the hell is that? Who the hell is this big boy walking up here? And this is very much a large human, right? 6'5", 275 pounds, but he carries it extremely well. Does not look sloppy whatsoever. No bad weight on him. I think this is a guy that can get to 300 pounds very easily if they wanted to. And I honestly think that's the move because it fits his skill set, right? Let him beef up and play as a shade or a nose and use that natural power that he has in his hands to be a disruptor in the middle of the line of scrimmage. He plays with great leverage, especially for being, like I said, 6'4", 6'5", and he's got ridiculous shock in his hands. Like when he gets his hands on guys, they feel it. And he generates so much movement with his sheer strength at the point of attack. Now, would you like to see more from him from a twitch or a burst off the line standpoint? Sure. But he's a people mover in the middle of the line of scrimmage, and that's becoming more and more pivotal on the defensive side of the ball. So I think he has a chance to be pretty damn disruptive at the next level, and I am so curious to see how he plays when you add 20, 25 pounds of even more good-looking mass to that frame. He has a chance to really be a problem at the next level.
Yeah, that's what SMU needs. They lose a bunch of defensive linemen, and so to get, if they can get Tyrone Winslow, that would be a big deal because you've got a guy in Jalen Shivers who can play a strong side defensive end. We'll talk about some other guys that they're trending for, in particular one edge prospect, and they need a big body that they can recruit, get in the high school ranks, and then develop him versus having to go through that transfer, which they've done just fine in for sure. Right. Grabbing defensive linemen, but they need somebody like a true high school big body that they can maybe rely on for the future.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that you're going to start to see more and more teams do. You can never take too many shots on the defensive and offensive fronts. Like you just can't, especially now with the portal. You would much rather take a chance and hope that that guy hits than not take a chance and that guy goes and balls out somewhere else and you missed your shot. So I think on the defensive front, especially when it comes to big bodies and big bodies that look like him, you absolutely take a chance at, and you hope you can fix and teach and refine some of the positional traits because you're not going to find guys that look like that just on the street. They just don't exist. So take the rare bodies and figure out what they can do for your team.
Speaking of talent, the linebacker position is one that is really, I would say, difficult to scout and hit on evaluation wise. I mean, between playing in the mix, like in all the trash and sifting through that. Look, I used an analogy.
You crushed it. I'm so proud of you. You're nailing this. Keep going.
Yeah, but between finding guys that can do that and playing in coverage and projecting their bodies the right way, it's a difficult position to figure out. And SMU, though, has been on Caleb Burns, who's a really, really talented prospect for a while now. And as of this recording, set to announce a decision on July 1st. SMU, Texas Tech, Baylor, kind of Houston maybe hanging around. This is probably boiling down to an SMU Tech battle. Tell me a little bit about Caleb Burns and why most of the in-state schools are so high on him.
Yeah, man. I mean, I really like Caleb Burns. This is somebody who also was at the ESPN Houston camp. So this is a guy I got to see in person, and he's not going to wow you physically, right? Like from a dimension standpoint, this isn't like Tyrone Winslow where the guy walks off the bus and you're like, whoa, that guy is clearly something else. He's closer to 6 feet tall, 220-ish pounds, not super long for the backer position, which is a little bit concerning, but he tested pretty well, right? Especially from an explosion and fluidity standpoint, which I really like. This is a guy that's run in the 11-1 range in the 100-meter this track and field season, which is excellent as a linebacker, especially going into their senior season. And when you turn on the tape, he is all over the football field. And I mean, he plays in space. He bangs between the hashes. He comes off the edge as a pass rusher. He loops in on stunts as a free blitzer, drops into zone, cover guys in man-to-man. He does literally everything, Billy, that you could ask for out of a linebacker. And he does it at an extremely high level. I just love the way he sees the field and plays downhill, but he can still function in space and cover like all kinds of grass. He reminds me of a player that, in hindsight, we were probably too low on coming out last year, and that would be Torian York the freshman All-American at Texas A&M last season. The physical build limits their ceilings, but the player is a damn good football player. And at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for. If you're a college team or SMU specifically, you want guys that help you win football games. And I think Caleb Burns is someone that can definitely help SMU or whatever school lands his talents win a lot of football games at the next level, wherever he ends up.
And we've seen and talked a lot about the linebackers that SMU's been after, and they've been able to hit on some guys. Brandon Booker,
such a good job, man. Such a good job.
What, like when you look at Burns, and there are unicorns like an Elijah Barnes, for example, committed to Texas. Right. We know what he can do. All the testing, he's looks like a strong side defensive end, but runs like a linebacker. I mean,
right.
But guys like Burns that can fit into a defense and just be productive year in, year out. I mean, that's another position that you need to hit on these guys when you have opportunities to.
Absolutely. And like you touched on at the beginning, this is becoming a more and more difficult position to evaluate for everybody because the position in general is not valued like it used to be. And what you're finding is a lot of the best players on their high school teams, they're not playing inside backer. They're playing either with a hand in the dirt off the edge or standing up off the edge, or they're playing as that like roaming free safety, like center fielder that has like essentially a two-way go, whether to like fly downhill or just stay back and roam the center as a center fielder. So you're having much, much less finished products at the linebacker position, right? You're basically, to use that puzzle analogy, you're having a lot of pieces missing. And you're basically guessing and projecting much more with linebackers now than you ever were in the past because you just don't know if these guys can key and diagnose as well as you used to because these guys simply aren't playing the position. So when you get a guy like Caleb Burns that really does play inside backer, they use him in space, they ask him to rush, they ask him to drop, they ask him to play man, they ask him to do everything. It just allows you to have less question marks with a guy coming in. You know he can diagnose. You know he can key. You know he can run downhill. You know he can cover in space. Essentially, this guy's a plug-and-play guy that you say, hey, physically and athletically, we know he's a little limited, but we know exactly what he's capable of. And so that gives you some sort of reassurance and comfortability when he's out on the field because you know exactly what he can and can't do.
Well, and on the other side of that, another prospect that SMU is looking at for a July 1st commitment date and hoping to reel that one in as well is all the way out in California, and he is kind of that true thumper type of linebacker. And Mark Ianakor from Narbonne High School out there in Harbor City, they produce some talent year in, year out, and SMU right in the mix to land him as well. What are the things that catch your eye with Mark?
Yeah, and it's funny, we talk about the modern game and what the modern game looks like. This is an old school cat. Like, this is a bit of a throwback player, in my opinion, because this guy plays an old school type of football, right? He's a between the hashes, tighten up your chin strap, downhill thumper that craves contact. Like, he wants every bit of the smoke when it comes to taking on blockers and being physical at the point of attack. You don't see a lot of guys like this anymore out of high school because of the way the game's changing and the linebacker position has turned into such a speed and sideline to sideline position that the old school Mike that a lot of people are used to seeing, that guy's asked to be strictly a hole filler between the tackles. And it's just not as valued as highly as it used to be. And to that point, I think Marquan Owusu is someone that we view as a potential high caliber draft pick. Not necessarily, but this is a player that every college football team needs as a tone setter for the defense. This is someone who makes his presence felt on short yardage situations and is one of the few players coming out of high school that really can play a role as an inside run stuffing linebacker immediately stepping onto a college campus. That's not normal nowadays. That's very rare. So he has a chance to play early as a situational player, and as an added bonus, I mean, Billy, I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people don't value special teams play, but this guy's going to be a mean, violent dude as a special teamer throughout his entire career. I like the role that Marquan Owusu plays for this SMU defense if he were to choose to go there. It's somebody that you know exactly what he is. You know what he's capable of. As long as you put him in those advantageous situations, he's going to thrive.
Yeah, so we'll be watching on July 1st. We all will be, because SMU also has another target announcing, and out in California, Chinedu Owusu. We're both going to have to work on that one, apparently. But out of Los Angeles, SMU 4-star edge on the On3 industry ranking. You and I were talking about him before. Super productive. Competition's questionable, but the Mustangs have appeared to have separated themselves in this recruitment. And he's a guy that at a position that you would like to take some swings at in terms of high-end talent and come away with him.
Yeah, man. I mean, the first thing to point out for like Chinedu Owusu is the absurdity of his stats from his junior year. And yes, like you mentioned, we're aware that he's playing in a league that's not exactly playing great football whatsoever, really. But being able to accumulate nearly like 100 tackles and 30 tackles for loss and 21 sacks as an edge rusher is ridiculous, no matter what league you're playing in. So the production is absurd. And I saw him at the Under Armour Los Angeles camp, and I thought he looked the part physically, which, I wish he was a bit longer, but he's got solid length for the edge position. But the film is so good. He plays off ball as an inside backer at times. He primarily lines up off the edge, but I really like his ability when working downhill and triggering to the football. The reason he's got so many tackles is because he's always the first guy to sniff out the play and trigger to the football. And I think that's something that translates to the next level, even if he's primarily playing as an edge, because being around the football is never a bad thing as a defensive player. So having guys that are constantly sniffing out what offenses are doing, no matter where they line up on the field, is always helpful. Athletically, I do think he's a bit limited, right? Doesn't have great top end speed to play off ball at the next level. Not the most fluid or loose in his hips to like truly thrive as a pass rusher, but he is stout and he's got great strength and hand usage at the point of attack. So maybe he's someone that's not ultra productive from a sack standpoint at the next level, but he's someone that's still going to produce at a high level as a run defender due to the instincts and effort level that he plays with down in and down out.
It'll be intriguing to see how SMU does on the 1st of July. That's one of those key dates for the SMU staff as they gotten in with a lot of guys who decided, hey, I don't want to do it on the 4th of July. Let me do it on the 1st of July.
Yeah, new month. Why not? Start off with a bang.
Yeah. Hey, it's the fireworks before the fireworks.
I love it. Yeah.
So, Cody, we can't thank you enough for your time on the Pony Express podcast. We always appreciate you stopping in and giving us all the goods. And we'll, of course, have you on again in the future. Awesome. And we'll talk some more recruiting and rankings.
Anytime, Billy. I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
There he is, Cody Bellaire. Thanks so much for joining us on the Pony Express podcast. And we'll catch you guys next time with another edition of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU On3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to OnThePonyExpress.com for more coverage.